Good evening, and welcome to our second program of our fall programs of the Wagner Society of Washington, D.C. We have a special program tonight, but I wanted first just to mention our subsequent programs in November and December. On Thursday, November 12th, our great board member and maestro, John Edward Niles, has a wonderful program talking about the librettos in the Meistersinger, and in particular, Beckmesser's song and what Beckmesser actually said. And second, the same scene where Eva, hiding behind the bushes with Walter, makes some very interesting observations and very poignant and very important that are often overlooked. So that's going to be a wonderful program. Then on December 10th, our great pal, that's a Thursday also, Ian Scott in Toronto, is going to conduct an interview with the great Ben Heppner. And Ben will talk a lot about the Wagner tenor roles that he's sung so well over the years. But tonight's very special. In the year 2000, the Wagner Society of Washington formed a partnership with the immortal Thomas Stewart and Evelyn Lear, and we called it the Emerging Singers Program. When Tom and Evelyn passed away, we looked around for people of that quality who could continue the program of assisting young singers. And again, John Edward Niles deserves all the credit in the world for reaching Dolora, and Dolora talking to Evelyn Lear late in her life, and Dolora finding Luana. And so we've enjoyed this partnership for 7 years now of helping between the Wagner Society of Washington and Dolora Zajick and Luana DeVol, two of the great singers of our generation, who have turned to become two of the great teachers of our generation, helping young people and perhaps not so young people who have the potential for careers singing Wagner. I'm very excited about that. And the summit of this work was to have taken place in this pandemic summer, but in July 2021, we've added a third stool to the leg to the stool, and that is the Miami Music Festival run by Michael Rossi. And I have to, at this point, offer a great regard and our memory for our wonderful board member, John Pohanka, who really made this happen. And what John made happen was our coming together, the Wagner Society and the American Wagner Project and the Institute for Young Dramatic Voices, coming together not just to train singers, but now to perform in Miami. And so we're looking forward with so much excitement to July 2021 for a performance of Das Rheingold in Miami, which will include basically all the major parts taken by our singers who auditioned and won the auditions. So Dolora and Luana will talk a little bit about that. Tonight, we're going to divide things into three little sections of about 20 minutes each. Dolora and I will talk a little bit about Dolora's life in music, and we'll hear a couple of excerpts. Then Luana and I will talk about her life in music and her career and a couple of wonderful excerpts. And then for the last third or 20 minutes or so, Dolora and Luana will talk, without me being around, about singing and teaching. And at the end of that, they are delighted to have to entertain your questions and comments. So without further ado, Dolora, if you want to come on now, you and I can talk a little bit about the magnificent career that you've had.
Hello.
Hi there, how are you?
Excellent, excellent.
Where are you?
I'm in Reno, Nevada.
Well, you look very pretty this evening.
Oh, well, I can when I have to.
I wish I could. Dolora, I always love to know where people started. And if you could take a minute or two, talk about your childhood, your youth, and maybe that first breakthrough moment, if there was one, when you fell in love with music.
Well, it was an unusual trajectory, actually. I heard, when I was 7 years old, I heard another child play a piano, and all of a sudden, that's what I wanted to do. I knew what I wanted to do. I'd never really heard much classical music before. She was playing a little Mozart piece, and it was just, that's what I wanted to do. And circumstances didn't allow that. Was not really have the opportunity to even get near a piano until I was in high school, and by then it was too late. So I decided I was going to become a doctor. I figured, well, I'll just do music as an avocation. Well, it turned out I had a voice, and it turned out that I had enough natural ability in areas where I had not had traditional training, and so I was able to catch up on the academic aspects of music, and I switched from pre-med to music. I mean, to major in opera, and I took the chance, and so I got my master's at University of Nevada, Reno, and they had a little opera company there, a little regional opera company there, and so I was able to get experience from the very beginning. So I was doing Third Ladies and the Magic Flute and Mrs. Nolan's and all kinds of things. So I was very fortunate that I started voice lessons when I was almost 22, and then by the time when I was halfway through 22, they were already giving me little roles. So in a sense, I started backwards. and so, but I did a very careful study of my craft, and I went to Manhattan School of Music, and then I was there for 3 years. I didn't want to pursue a doctorate because I thought it would be more practical to just do the professional studies program and just keep my foot in the door. And I started doing major roles on those little pitiful productions where there's there's one piano and 3 violins in a church basement. And so I did a whole bunch of major roles under those conditions, and actually it was quite useful. It was very helpful. And then I entered the Tchaikovsky competition, 1982, and I got the bronze medal. And at that time, it was kind of a big deal because it was at the height of the Cold War. It was a very odd situation, but somehow I got a bronze medal, and I came back with it. And with that little feather in my cap, I was able to take that and audition for some other things. And I auditioned for the Met training program, and they insisted I was a soprano. And they wanted me to study with their teacher, and I was horrified because I had had 3 lessons with that teacher, and I thought that would be a suicide if I did that, even though it was the Met. So I kind of avoided the situation, and then I auditioned for San Francisco Opera, and it was Terry McEwen was running it, and he just happened to be looking for a Verdi mezzo, a real one. And he had recorded 3 greats. He had recorded Ebbastignani, Giulietta Simeonato, and Fedor Barbieri. He was with London Records. He had heard all 3 of them sing professionally. And so he knew what a Verdi mezzo was. He knew I wasn't a soprano. So I knew I was in the right hands. And I was there. It was a wonderful training program at that time. And I received excellent guidance, and they gave me tons of experience. And by the time I was finished, I was a young professional. They gave me a contract to sing Trovatore, and that was really it. That was the beginning. And then I got contracts with major recordings and major houses right from the start. My international career, anyway. I would already been singing small parts, but but when I made that turn, it was a very, very quick succession into that. And probably because
Well, you've covered your career. You've covered your career in about 4 minutes, and I want to go back a little bit.
Okay.
I think when we're talking youth, we're talking somewhere in Oregon. Is that correct?
Yes, I was born in Salem, Oregon. And it was just as strange then as it is now. It was probably the most polarized place in the country at that time, you know, that was, you know, ultra liberal and ultra conservative living side by side. And it was a constant war waiting to break out. And it doesn't surprise me that there's all this unrest in Portland, because, you know, I lived there, so I know what kind of people live there and why it would be so, why it would be one of the places where there's more angst than some other places during our national crisis.
Okay, well, we're not going to get into politics tonight.
It's probably a good idea.
You said you discovered a voice. You have a voice that's utterly unique in the history of opera. What do you mean you discovered? When was it? How old were you?
I was 22.
When you realized you had some. Sorry?
I was 22. 22 years old. You stopped. The sound stopped. You froze.
Yeah, I think that may be my internet. We'll just keep going.
Okay.
You just keep talking. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
We'll
Okay,
edit this out.
Okay.
And when was it that somebody else told you, my God, you have a voice? I mean, were you singing in a choir at 14 years old, or?
No, I
what?
wasn't. No, I discovered I had a voice at 22, an operatic voice. I did discover it a little bit sooner in high school, but I didn't think of it as a career. I just thought, oh, I have this voice. It wasn't until I was 22 when I realized I had what it took for a career, and my teacher recognized it about the same time I did. It was a.
How could the Metropolitan Opera have tried to squeeze you into soprano roles, knowing what you do about your voice?
It's very common, because the difference between a soprano and a mezzo is only a half a step. And people are often confused by timbre. They hear a darker timbre or a brighter timbre, and they mistake that for a voice type. For example, you can take a lyric bass baritone and a basso cantante. They can have the same range, a similar timbre, same size of voice, but there will be one crucial difference in that one's voice is going to turn higher than the other one. And that's going to determine what their tessitura is and what rep they'll sing. There will be some overlap, but not a lot. And of course the tessitura determines the stamina, that part of the voice that can last the longest on stage for that particular, in that particular part of the range. And so for a soprano, that tessitura is B to B, and for a mezzo, it's B flat to B flat. And everything, you know, the passaggio starts a half a step lower. So if you know where that passaggio is and you know where it is, there's no confusion.
The Tchaikovsky competition was in Moscow, is that correct?
Yes, it was.
Was it simultaneous with the piano competition?
Yes, it was.
And what was it like being in Moscow at that age and at that period in time in your career?
Well, talk about culture shock, because at that time, like, they didn't have any, you know, billboards or advertisements, and it was it was the Soviet Union in every way that you can imagine back then. And so it was the first time I'd ever been out of the country or out of the West. You know, I went to Manhattan School of Music, so I was on the East Coast for that period of time, but I was still basically a Western girl. And then when I went to Moscow, it was it was culture shock in the extreme. Not only how people thought and what they did, but also just that fact that it didn't get dark at night. And I found that
Yeah.
very strange. And so it was a big adjustment for me, but it was one. And even though many things happened there, and it gave me a window into the beginnings of understanding how the world really worked, I don't regret having gone there, nor do I regret having gone there recently and seen the difference, what's happened between now and then, what's changed, what hasn't. And but the one thing that really stood out is there's an incredible bank of talent, operatic talent there. Incredible. I mean, we just see the surface of it, but it's amazing the potential that is there for opera. Amazing, the voices.
Was there a, you think of Azucena, you think of Ulrika, the opera Norma. You've owned these roles, you've defined them in a way. Was one of them an epiphanic moment for you when you knew, I'm doing this better than anybody in the world, and maybe better than it's ever been done?
Well, to be really honest, yes. But I also knew what my limits were. So it wasn't, not only did I know what I could do better than anybody, I also knew what I couldn't do and what I had no business going near. I did push the envelope in some places. I knew what my limits were. I realized there was no such thing as a perfect singer, but I was able to put my stamp on, in my own way, on certain roles that still respected the style of what I was doing. And I think that a lot of what happens is that singers aren't allowed to evolve artistically these days, like I was. And I think the reason why I was allowed to do that was that my voice teacher was primarily a conductor. He wasn't really a voice teacher, but he just happened to know something about singing. And he understood style. And so when he played, he kind of like, as long as I understood the musical rules and stylistic rules, anything was game. And I also was listening a lot to the old singers, and I noticed that there were some things that everybody did the same and other things that people did differently. And I started to get a feel for where you could have freedom and where you couldn't. And I feel like singers today, a lot of them are not being given the tools of what's permissible and what isn't. And where they can really go to town in certain places and where they can't. And it's really solving problems that creates the art. You have a problem, like maybe you got to sing this consonant and this vowel on this pitch, and it's in a tricky place. It's an important word. It's got to be heard. There's a certain tempo that needs to be taken. There's a marcato there. And so how do you put that all together so that you honor all those things, but you make it your own?
Well, this is a perfect lead-in to the Institute for Young Dramatic Voices, but I would like to postpone that for two reasons. I'd like you and Luana in the third section of this evening to talk about, you've recently sadly announced that you're no longer going to sing on the stage, but you have this wonderful, wonderful thing that you have created and that you and Luana have created about Wagner. And I want you two to talk about that in the third segment, because also there's so much more to your life and your interests and your intelligence. I happen to know this. You're a composer, you're an artist, and you study bird brains. Talk about the J family and the research that you've been doing for just a minute, if you would.
Well, actually, the research that I've been doing recently has a lot to do with how music came to humans from an evolutionary perspective. And it's amazing what birds have revealed to us about our own evolution. And it was, interestingly enough, it was a bird, it was a scrub jay that got me on this track. And I had this scrub jay, he would come into my house, he'd talk to me, and he'd sit on my hand and he'd sing to me. And I would whistle back. He didn't like my singing. If I sang, he squawked at me. But if I whistled back and I kept sync with it, and I either in a synchronized moment or in an antiphonal way, he would keep going. And I thought, he's liking this. And I was liking it. And I thought I had to find out why. Why was that happening? Why was it that when I got off sync, he lost interest and fly away? And he would do it not for food. He actually came to synchronize the sounds. Well, it turns out that humans put out a hormone called oxytocin. It's a bonding hormone, and it reaches its highest levels just as a mother is about to give birth, just as she's starting to nurse, and when a group of human beings get together and make a supreme effort to synchronize sound or movement, which is music or dance. But it has to be a real serious attempt at synchronization and not just doing it for fun. And what that does is it raises oxytocin levels, which is why people get a high singing in a crack choir or being in a crack drill team. That's what creates that high. And there's also, to a much lower level, it happens vicariously when we watch somebody else or other people making music, especially if there's more than one person making music, because there's a synchrony going on and we become a vicarious part of it, and it actually raises our oxytocin levels. Not as much as it does the people that are performing, but the people that are watching it get it too. But it only works if you do it in a group. If you try to stand out, the oxytocin level goes away. It sinks. Okay.
Amazing.
So, yeah, and so and it turned out that this bird that was singing to me was getting a vasotosin high, which is the male bird version of oxytocin. So I was getting an oxytocin high, and he was getting a vasotosin high, and it was like augmenting each other, right? And so the thing that
well,
I lost you.
Yeah, I think that's my internet. Probably it's weak here in the boondocks of Idaho. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, then let me turn to another subject. We're going to hear two excerpts of yours. Would you briefly describe them for us?
Well, one is Omneris, when I made my debut at the Met as Omneris. My first debut
did they call you?
China. Huh?
What did they call you when you sang the Omneris?
Some sort of a brass instrument, I guess.
I think it was a trumpet.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's right, the human trumpet. It was the first time I had sung that role at the Met. I was singing it with Placido Domingo, so it was the first time I had sung with him as well. So it was a very interesting night. I didn't have time to be scared because I had to keep that happened afterwards. Afterwards, I thought, did I really do that?
Could you describe the second excerpt that we're going to hear?
Yes, that was a Richard Tucker. I remember that one that very well. That was Lady Macbeth. Her aria La Luce Langue, and it's evil personified. Anyway, I love playing evil people. I don't get to be evil in real life, so I get to get all my evilness out in evil roles.
The incredible mezzo-soprano Dolora Zajick has selected La Luce Langue from the dramatic opera Macbeth by Giuseppe Verdi, based on the tragedy by William Shakespeare.
Hi there.
Hi, Jim. How are you?
I'm all the better for seeing you.
Oh, that's...
Luana, you have one of the most extraordinary biographies. And Aachen was such a watershed moment, it seems to me. Can you start with your youth in San Bruno and the way you came to music and theater management and the hard work and the work that you put in for so long, which turned out to be, it seems to me, a tremendous blessing when you reached a certain age with a zero after it, and were offered at the very last moment a contract in Aachen. It's just amazing. Could you start on the first half of that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And Dolora's path and mine are completely different because it took me a long way around, whereas she was directly recognized and went through young artist programs. I did other things. First of all, born in a middle-class family, and my father was in the Navy when I was born. And so he came back. We have some films of that. It's very sweet. And I was raised in a very conventional family. And my first awareness of music was walking down a street past a church on a beautiful sunny morning in San Bruno, California. And out of the church door was streaming this music of violin classes. It was Mr. Wexler from Austria, and he was teaching violin there. So I began actually, I pulled my mother into the church and I wanted desperately to see what that was. And I begged her, please let me have violin lessons. I want violin lessons. And she gave it. My parents were very supportive. And so I got violin lessons, which I played for 5 years and got quite good at it. I was put into the school orchestra. And when they had this little young 6 or 7 year old person, I was in the last seat, of course. And the next rehearsal, I was moved up to the front. And so all along the way, music was a great part of our family. We all sang in church choir. My mother was alto, and I was in the soprano. My dad was tenor. My brother was baritone, and another brother, he was too young to be in the choir. And so this was a great part of my my upbringing. Also, luckily, my father was very eclectic in his tastes, and I heard many different styles and kinds of music and loved them all. And so that was my first beginning. And outside of that, it was simply not taking violin lessons and church choir. And then I was invited to sing for the San Francisco Opera Chorus. This is springing up to high school now. And I was invited to sing for the San Francisco Opera Chorus. And I sang and I was accepted. And at that time, I was also enrolled at San Francisco State College at that time, and had the privilege of commuting by cable car from out in where the college was, and down Fairmont Street by the clang, clang, clang of the trolley, and went down to Fugazi Hall in North Beach. And that was my first experience with professional singing in the chorus. And it was quite demanding because everybody was much more mature. I was still a teenager, but I think I was 19, something like that. And I loved it. It was really amazing to go through that. So the San Francisco Opera Chorus gave me my first taste of the opera, singing in the chorus and standing behind the stars. And I heard some wonderful singers. But you know, the whole time, I never had an inkling that I should have a career. I didn't realize that I had a career voice, never thought of a career. I was enjoying the life that I had of being a student and singing in the chorus. And one day, I went to hear Tannhäuser when I was not in that particular chorus, and I was in the audience of San Francisco. And up until that point, I had been singing with many groups in the San Francisco Bay Area. And when she came out, I thought, to sing Dich teure Halle, I thought, I think I can sing that. I think I can sing like that. And it was the first inkling that perhaps I should think seriously about it. And I gave myself a long time to think about a plan if I really wanted to launch, because I knew what their career was like. You know, it wasn't comfortably at home like most people can enjoy, not you, but other people. And so then I worked out a 2-year plan where I was going to get as much information as I could about being a professional singer and also auditioning for people. And at the end of that, I did get some work. I was singing with the Seattle Opera. That time they had, it was Glenn Ross still. He had the gold and silver cast, and the gold was the international cast and the silver cast was the young cast. And I sang Leonora in Forza del Destino for him. Loved it. Jerome Hines was in the other cast, and he said, I'm just going to have to wait to retire until you get to the Met. Because unfortunately that never happened. So he had to go a couple of years before I got there. But that was basically it. And at the end of the 2 years, I planned, if I don't have anything in America enough, I'm going to try in Europe. And so the last thing that I had lined up was covering Ariadne auf Naxos at San Francisco Opera. And Christoph von Dohnanyi was there. There's a story about that. As cover, I knew that I was going to sing the technical dress rehearsal and the first orchestra rehearsal because Rosalind Plowright was engaged somewhere else. And so I went to an orchestra alone rehearsal, and Christoph von Dohnanyi was sitting there, and I said, maybe I could sing a little bit. And I went over to him and I said, Maestro, I'm going to sing your rehearsal, such as such, the orchestra rehearsal. Would you mind if I sang with you while you're working with the orchestra? And he said, oh, you're going to sing the rehearsal? I don't think he knew. And so he was very kind. And he said, well, sure, you can bring the chair down, stay here, or you can bring it down in the orchestra pit. And I just thought, I don't know, I can't believe it. It's so not typical of me. I just took the seat. I said, okay, and I'm taking it down in the orchestra, and I sat by him. This was a pivotal moment for me, very pivotal. And because he started conducting, not with the regular part, but he started with Ariadne's parts. He wanted to hear me sing. And at the end, going a little bit further, he stopped to tap, tap, and make orchestra corrections. And then he said, this is Luana DeVol. She's going to be singing in rehearsal with us, and I like it very much. Well, it took about 5 minutes until the rest of the cast started streaming in, and they wanted to sing, but Christoph von Dohnanyi said no. But it was pivotal, but because he asked me later, what are your plans? What are you going to do? And I said, well, I was thinking of going to Europe at the end. I've been trying to get work here for 2 years. And he said, yes, he said, I think you should. And so off I went to Europe, and I auditioned for 4 weeks. And then 2 weeks later, I got a call from Aachen, and that's when I joined that company. And that was pivotal because from there, I started guesting all over very quickly. I worked very hard. I was trained by Jess Thomas what to do. And so people gave me opportunities, and I had a lot of, even in the first 2 years at Aachen, I was ready to go. I was older. I was already 40 when I started, which is very unusual. Dolora was 22. I was 40. And so my career went up nonstop from there on. I've just had a wonderful, wonderful life singing all over the world.
Well, that Aachen experience itself was a very European experience, wasn't it? It was a kind of a repertory company. There's so many wonderful small opera companies in Europe, but it seemed to me this played so well to your advantage. It just filled out your repertory. It filled out your opportunity to sing early and often. And finally, people got to hear you.
Well, absolutely. And not to forget that I'm not independently wealthy. I had to work to earn my keep and to pay for my lessons. And so from standing up from the desk, I was assistant general manager at the Oakland Paramount Theater with a good friend, Peter Botto, who was general manager at that time, and he was very generous with letting me go. And so I had to learn the transition from being sitting behind a desk and running an office to being a singer full time. And it was quite a transition. But in Aachen, I was able to sing all 16 performances. And you sometimes you don't feel as good as others. I had to learn. So I learned by doing. And I didn't go to any music schools or any programs, and just was thrown into the fire and took it from there.
I think one night a fellow named Wolfgang Wagner came to hear you in Aachen.
Oh, Jim. Oh, that was terrifying. Of course I knew there was a Wolfgang Wagner, but when I learned that he was going to be there opening night, and they were having an exhibit of the chorus master, whose name I'm sorry to say escapes me. He was there for years. And they were having an Ausstellung, an exhibit of things that he had done. So that's why Wolfgang Wagner was there. And it was my very first Wagner role, my very first cento, which is not an easy role to sing. So I was very, very conscious of those blue eyes out there evaluating my performance. And but it went, thank goodness, it went very well. And he came back and he kept track of me. He's the master, and he just has a lot of, you probably remember, he just had a great mind for the singers and kept track of those that he liked. And eventually I did get to sing with him, so it was wonderful.
Well, when, I know cento was one of the great roles you sang in Aachen, but when was the Wagner experience for you? When did you realize not only the greatness of the music, but your great ability to sing it?
It was, I was in Aachen for 3 years, and center was the only Wagner role I did. And then I moved to the Mannheimer Theater, Mannheim, in Germany. And this was it was a theater with a very large repertoire. And they had a lot of German operas, both Strauss and Wagner. And so I did my first Lohengrin there. I did my first Kaiserin there. I did several of the Valkyries. And I did my first Brünnhilde, the Sieglinde Brünnhilde there. So that was where I really started leaning more towards the German repertoire. Prior to that time, I was singing both Italian and German, and it was versatile. And I actually enjoyed that experience. It was nice to have a foot in either genre. And, but it was the German, there's something so special about singing Wagner. It's dialogue, and you're talking to people. Most of it is talking back and forth, conversations, and it's so psychological. And you learn more by listening to the character who's singing to you than you do just by singing on stage like Italian repertoire. I love the music, of course, because it was Wagner. It was a Gesamtkunstwerk. And I just love that feeling of having the music be so knitted together with the words and the expressions. And I found, and of course I had sung with Jess Thomas, and he had trained me in the Strauss repertoire, not in the German, but so he was a great one for being very expressive on stage, and I listened to his recordings and things. So that's where I developed my very great love for the Wagner, was in Mannheim and in guesting when I was able to sing in other places.
I would have guessed, yes or no, we love to say that Wagner loved Bellini-like nuanced, Italianate, beautiful singing all the time, not barking, not shouting. I would guess, and please respond, that your vast experience at Aachen and otherwise in Italian repertory must have, did it or did you not help you to sing Wagner?
It helped, both of them helped me. The German helped me sing the Italian more expressively, and the legato line of the Italian, and this is what I teach now, is to sing Italianate vowels, sing forward vowels, sing lyrically, and you express by the use of the consonants. The difference is, in German, you might have a word, a 7-letter word, and only one of those is a vowel. And you have to learn how to project the vowel wonderfully and smoothly and easily, and not let all of those consonants tie you and throw you back, which it does to so many people. That's where the bark came from. You know, and if you want to say something like schmuck, which is schmuck, which means like jewelry, you know. So if you emphasize the consonants, which was the Bayreuth bark, you don't get the words as much, and you don't sing the line as well. And this is what I'm teaching now.
We're going to listen to a couple of excerpts of yours, the Kaiserin and the Brunhilde from Götterdämmerung. Would you describe these excerpts, a little bit, how you sung them, what they've meant to your career, what they've meant to you personally?
I'm glad we're doing these two, because both were very, very important, very key operas in my development and in my joy of remembering back with the memories. The Frau ohne Schatten came first, and I was invited by Wolfgang Sawallisch to come and audition for, I think it was Aitra in Ägyptische Helena. And so I had learned the part, and I sang the Aitra. And there was another singer in listening in the hall, and she was supposed to sing that role. And she said, "We're going to dinner." She told me in no uncertain terms, "This is my role, you can't have it." But the thing was, Sawallisch is no dummy, you know. He wasn't auditioning me for that role. He was auditioning me for the Kaiserin. And when he called and invited me to be the Kaiserin in Frau ohne Schatten, I couldn't believe it. It was such an honor to sing with this magnificent conductor. And the exciting part of it, it was to take place in Japan as well as in Munich. It was a co-production. And as it was, this was the time when the Munich stage had the virus. And so we were not able to do the premiere in Munich. We did the premiere in Japan. And I found this was a multicultural effort, and I loved working with the aesthetic of the kabuki dancers and with all of the arm movements, and it was just so much fun. And it was quite authentic, unlike another director that uses some of those gestures, but this was fully kabuki. And our makeup was you'll see it with white chalk. It took hours for us to get ready for this. But it was such a beautiful production, and the magic happened, and wonderful cast. And I just loved singing the Kaiserin so much. And just that experience of being in Japan and then coming to Munich and with Sawallisch, and later on it was Horst Stein that took it over, and I love Horst Stein as well. So I'm glad we're doing this. This is the Kaiserin's Auftritt, which is the first thing she sings. And this is the coloratura part. The voice has to be very light, and you have a high D just to ping. And it's, one time in a dressing room, I tried it and it went squawk. And so the pianist for me, he said, "Oh my goodness." I said, "No, it just means I have to pay more attention when I get on stage." And it was the best one.
There is a bird chirping in that scene after all. So
that's the falcon, yes.
let's turn for a moment to another minor role that has been created for the stage, that of Brunhilde. Would you talk about you and Brunhilde, please? And by the way, we're gonna, when you're done, we're gonna go to the excerpts, and after the excerpts, we're gonna come back, and I want you and Dolora to focus on the AWP and the Institute and your roles and your careers, not as singers, but as teachers. But let's get to the Brunhilde first.
Well, this was by Peter Konvichny, who's known as one of the bad boys in directoring. His works are a little bit on the modern side. But when you work with a director like that, I always felt personally that I'm not going to resist this new approach. I'm going to try to understand and work with him. And we had a marvelous rehearsal section. We did it more like an acting. We all sat around a table, talked about the scene, and went up and did it. And it seemed to just gel together magnificently. It was this production, Goethe-Dämmerung, in the Stuttgarter Opera. It was Opera House of the Year, Chorus of the Year, Director of the Year, Conductor of the Year, live, thankfully, Singer of the Year for my Brunhilde. So it was a wonderful experience, and I loved performing it every time. So this is this scene is the immolation scene. It's a section of the immolation scene, which of course is 20 minutes long, so we don't want to play the whole thing. And it was, again, the Opera of the Year, that particular 2001.
I'll just add one note, then you were Singer of the Year in Europe 2 years, not just one.
2 years, yes. So what are we going to talk about?
Well, we could start with the Rheingold. I think it's exciting that we have partnered with the Miami Music Festival because we've had a preparation program going. We've been needing a venue and they've been needing preparation, and somehow this sort of answered the need for both. And so we're really excited for this partnership. And I know that Michael Rossi had auditioned around the country and even out of the country, and he ended up casting more than half with our people. So, I'm really curious as to how we're going to be setting this up now for, we got to set up the right workshops. What is American Wagner Project? What is the preparation for Rheingold? Because we need both. We need to keep both in preparation.
Yeah, we need both. Yeah, it was in the program in July of 2020, which normally we would have done in Reno, but because of the pandemic, we had to do it virtually. But in this time, I did have the chance to work with our cast. I think almost all of them, on the vocal preparation and also in the diction. And Michael Rossi also liked the idea of doing that, and he asked me to do a diction class, 2 weeks of diction classes with his people that were not in our AWP program or IYDV program. And so I had a chance to meet the other singers, and I think you're going to be pleased with them. They're really lovely singers, every one of them. I like particularly the Mima was just fantastic. And so I think we'll have a good enjoyment with that. So I think coming down the tube, we talked about maybe a workshop, and also a week before they start staging, we could plan a master class there to get them ready for the staging rehearsals. So I think that's should be good.
Yeah, that'll be a really good idea. Well, I like the idea of having things spaced out over the year so that so we can start creating this environment rather than you just come to a workshop, you do the thing, and then you leave. Yeah. And so this, we've had some continuance with the Wagner Society of Washington, D.C. Now, interestingly enough, they're the ones that got us all started on this. I remember when I started this program, the Institute of Young Dramatic Voices, the thing that was going through my mind is we were starting to get some people that were interested in Wagner, and we just weren't set up for Wagner. My experience had been with Italian opera and French, and even though I had sung in German, Wagner was not my expertise. And so I didn't know where I was going to find the right person to head this. And then I remember when I was singing with the Washington National Opera, and had this opportunity to meet with Evelyn Lear.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and we had sent her Issachia Savage. Now at that time we didn't have the American Wagner Project, but he was part of the Institute at that time, and I wanted her to hear him because I thought this guy's got real Wagnerian potential.
Yes.
And indeed, she saw what his potential was, and it was not long after he won the first prize at the Seattle
Wagner contest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
He got the audience award. He got the first prize. He swept all the first prizes, and so Evelyn and I got to talking about programs, what I thought a program should be and what she thought a program should be, and her health wasn't the greatest. She was already in bad health at that point. And unbeknownst to me, she had decided that she wanted to give us her program because she said we were the only ones. She felt we were the only ones that would realize her ideal in what she had started in the first place. Now, I thought, this is wow, and she's giving this to me, and I'm not a Wagner expert, and I'm going to have to really get off my butt and find somebody. So I start asking around, and there were several people that were interested, but they just didn't feel like a good fit, because I was looking for someone who had had performance experience. I was looking for someone who understood the business. I needed someone who could take the kids from point A to point B, were willing to work with beginners, and realizing that it was going to take time to evolve the program. And I was having trouble finding somebody, and then it was Jim Pearson. He said, it was Jim Pearson. He says, have you thought of Luana DeVol? And I thought, yeah, but you probably wouldn't be interested, you know. And I remember having seen you in Barcelona. You were doing, you were singing Lohengrin, and I was so impressed. And, and I thought, I said, who's that? And they said, that's Luana DeVol. And I said, and she's still singing? And they said, she sounds so good. So, that told me right there, that's a sign of an excellent vocal technique. So I thought about it and started asking people questions. And people's faces would light up with happiness, either because of their professional association or their personal association. I said, this is a good sign. And then I hadn't found anybody that had everything that I was looking for except you. So I took a chance. Do you remember that phone call?
Oh my gosh, I think it went on for an hour and a half.
I'll let you take over.
Well, Dolora called, and it was a marvelous phone call, and I was so surprised, and I thought, this is a great idea, but my goodness, it was a great responsibility. And that's what I thought. I thought, to take something like this on, you really have to be committed. And I knew of you, of course. Just a little tangent. You have to remember, our first Begegnung, our first meeting, was at San Francisco Opera when I was doing Ariadne, and you were one of the young artists there. And here we are. Our lives have gone on for 20 years or so, and we're meeting up again. And so I thought about it long and hard, and I thought, am I capable of fulfilling? That's a great task. What you wanted in a person, very great responsibility. And so I said yes, and here we are 7 years later, I guess. And it's been an amazing enhancement of the IYDV program to offer the full spectrum, from discovery young singers all the way to the people who are in their 30s and perhaps changing Fach, or exploring Wagner with us, and some are turning out very well. And so I think it was a great idea, and I think only with your leadership, which is amazing, and over these years, and I mean that sincerely, it's just, you are one amazing leader. And so I think we've done a good thing for music and for Wagner, and with only the help of the Washington Society, the Washington Wagner Society helping us, and being so firmly in back of us. It's just been a wonderful relationship, I think.
Yeah, I felt like we were able to continue on with Evelyn Lear's vision.
Yes, yeah, so important, so important.
So I was really happy with that.
Yeah.
Well, another thing that I had in mind when I picked you was, when Wagner said that he wanted a bel canto approach, I knew exactly what he meant by that.
Mm-hmm.
And bel canto for me is the underpinning for both Verdi and Wagner. If you can't do bel canto, you can't do either. Really, you can't.
Mm-hmm.
And what is bel canto? I mean, what is it really? So you've got bel canto as a musical style, and you got bel canto as a vocal technical approach. Okay, so if you go from the technical approach, what it meant was you could go from one note to the next without connecting, without a break.
Mhm.
You were able to do a real messa in voce with a pinpoint of focus, expanding, come back. You had clean, and you were able to do various different kinds of coloratura, whether it was sostenuto or aspirated, or, you know, there were many different kinds of coloratura, but you knew how to do those. And that ineffable thing that you call legato. Legato is so important in bel canto. And of course, if you don't have that sense of legato, you're not going to be able to string those German consonants together. You're not going to be able to if it's going to make Verdi sound like papa music if you don't understand bel canto musical ideas. And the other thing about, you know, and and I think Wagner was also talking about a musical approach, in that there were certain musical idioms that expressed emotions. How you did a portamento, how you connected two notes together, was expressive. And when you got into verismo, that all kind of went out the window. It all became about coloration of the voice to express it, and making the voice sound tortured, and, you know, when you're in anguish. And and it was meant to be realistic and in the vernacular, and it almost ruined opera. It almost got away from itself, but it fortunately it was reeled back in and found its proper place in, without, you know, destroying voices. And they did away with that musical phrasing and how you go back between a duplet and a triplet, and how you know how you put words to the notes. And I think that's what he was talking about. And, you know, and pitch is a musical device too for expressiveness. And of course, Wagner was a master at that. He was, you know, he came from a harmonic point of view. And so when he did these pitch things, they were very, there was an expressiveness to it in the way he put it together. And it had a bel canto approach to it. And if you don't understand bel canto, you're not going to understand the musical idioms, you know, and those motifs. Those are based on bel canto techniques, bel canto musical devices.
Yeah, and the one wonderful thing that we have with the voice is that we can tune a pitch. It's not like on the piano. If you play a G, it is a G. But for us, it depends on where it is in the scale that you're singing and within the chord you're singing. And sometimes it's very expressive, and that pitch has to be just a little bit higher, the next one a little bit lower, and maybe the next one right in the middle to get that expressiveness. And you have to understand the line and what the composer wanted, where he was going and what he wanted to be expressed. And I think that's a wonderful thing too. It's a tool that I try to pass on to our younger singers here, and teach them. They have to listen. It's not just, you can't just deliver the pitch, the words and the rhythm. That's only the beginning. That's just the building blocks. And then you have to go into phrasing and expressiveness. And in order to do that, you have to know the meaning of the words, and how often do people come and they have not translated their music. So if anybody is working with younger singers out there that's listening to this, please emphasize the text. They have to know what they're singing before they can put their voices to it and express it properly.
And not only what they're singing, but what everybody else is singing, because how can you react if you don't know what they're saying?
Yes, that's true.
Yes, yeah. So you know, and I find that, you know, the kids in our program, that separates the wheat from the chaff right away.
Definitely.
You know, the ones that come and, you know, they because we take a certain number of diamonds in the rough, and some of them come up to snuff, and they get a wake up call. Oh, I got to learn this, and then they start working. And then there's some of them that they don't see the point, and well, goodbye.
yeah, they don't get it. Yeah, it's more than just standing there. I call it massaging the voice, the vocal folds. You know, if they're just Yeah, because your brain has to be more, singing is, my gosh, 150% mental, right? You know, and it's steered here, not here.
Yeah, and it's a unique kind of brain training that most people aren't aware of how complicated that is. There was a study that was done. They studied, what was it? The people that in the highest performing professions, where they have to perform at the highest levels. It was Olympic.
Fire pilot.
It was bomber pilots.
Yeah.
Olympic decathlon. And then they looked at opera singers, Carmelite nuns, Buddhist monks, martial artists, and concert pianists. And they looked at, what they did was they just looked at their brains to see what their brains were actually doing when they were learning their craft, and what it was like when they were actually doing their craft. And what they discovered is that these people that were functioning at the highest level, that were able to do things at the highest levels, when they were learning things, their brains lit up more than other learning processes in other professions, because they were pairing up different parts of the brain, especially opera singing, because you're pairing up different parts of the brain that don't normally connect with each other. And so they have to completely retrain their brains. And they have to learn how to think with their sensory motor cortex instead of their cerebral cortex. That's, you need the cerebral cortex, of course, to plan what you're going to do. And, you know, but it's actually the sensory motor cortex that does it. And the amazing thing, what they discovered, is in all these professions, when they were at peak function, their cerebral cortex was actually shut down.
Oh no, that's interesting.
Yes,
wow.
And they were actually operating from their sensory motor cortex.
Interesting. Yeah. But it's such a conundrum, because in one fact, you have to be completely relaxed, and other places your body has to be working like crazy, particularly mentally, but also physically. In the breathing apparatus, the support apparatus, you're working hard. When you finish a 5-hour opera, you should feel like you had a wonderful workout in the gym. You know, you're refreshed from all of that oxygen you've been breathing, and your body has been working, but in harmony. And it's not straining. If you don't feel like that when you're finished, you're not singing right. Everybody, Dolora and I have, I hope you've enjoyed it. We certainly enjoyed being with you. Perhaps you have some questions to ask us that we can clarify things that have been said, or on things that have not yet been said and you have interest. So we'd like to welcome your Q&A session right now. Please ask your questions.
Well, thank you, Dolora. Thank you, Luana. You're back on, you're unmuted. And so we do have some Q&A. I saw people have some hand raised too, so let me look at this Q&A. So the first question is for Dolora. Is this oxytocin data published? I would love to know, thanks. This is from Jack Roth.
Oh, there's tons. Just go on the internet and look up studies on oxytocin, and you can find reams and reams on it. It's been a very well studied hormone. That would probably be the best way. I mean, it would fill a library what's been researched on it.
Okay. There's from Mark Golden. To your point on the importance of text, I had the great privilege of watching Evelyn coach our emerging singers. She would often spend more of the session having them speak the text, and then invariably sing the piece much, much better after they sing the piece. That was from Mark. All right.
Hi, Mark.
So, we're gonna go to a caller, Betty Byrne. Go ahead and unmute yourself, please, Betty. Hello, Betty.
Have I unmuted?
You're live. Go ahead.
Okay. Luana, it was wonderful to both see you and hear you, of course. But Dolora, I did want to mention that I was at your performance of Amneris. So that was a thrill to be at the Met. I am now 87 years old. So that was a few years ago that I was at the Met listening to you. And I can't begin to tell both of you in experiencing and getting to know Evelyn and Tom as well as I got to know them, being in their classes and listening to the way that they were coaching their students was amazing. And I want to say, both of you are very similar in your techniques.
Good. Good, Betty. Well, I appreciate you. It's first of all, hello, and I miss seeing you, and I'm looking forward to next time we get together. And I like the fact that you're bringing up the diction part of it, and it's a very, very important tool to use in your teaching, particularly with the German language, because you must be sure that you get the vowels out and properly, and that it reveals, speaking the text with body support, we call it intonation. And so that you are actually activating the body at the same time you're saying the text, which is a similar activity of singing. So it's an extremely important tool. Also, it helps them realize, I often go one step further, and I'll have the student, maybe they're singing something in German, and I will have them translate in their own words as they're working on the text. Now you have to sing it, you have to say it, speak it in English. And then they go back to the German and they have a much greater understanding of it. It's also a very good tool. Again, there's a coach in New York that he said you have to speak the text 10 times to each one time you sing it. The text is so important. So thank you, Betty, for bringing that point up. I'm glad to answer your question.
And thank you, Betty. And I'm amazed that you play so well. I mean, hey, this is a Betty. Oh, this is Betty Byrne.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm confusing with somebody else. Please accept my apologies.
Going on to the next question.
William Harwood, go ahead and unmute yourself. William Harwood.
I sang in a production of Alieko with Isacha Savage in 2004 at my church in Washington. He was just an amazing guy to work with, and his voice was so powerful, but he was so sweet. It was just amazing guy to work with. And I'm glad to see that he's gone on to better things. And I also wanted to know about Bunthorne's Bride. Oh, I've done Patience. Do you see a connection between doing Gilbert and Sullivan and training for the opera?
Well, actually, I think that Gilbert and Sullivan, you know, learning to do things in your own language sometimes will instruct you on what you need to do in other languages.
Yeah.
I think it's important for vocal technique, and also if you do things in the language that you speak, you do things in a subtle way that it takes a little bit longer to learn in a language that you don't normally speak. And I think it raises awareness of what you need to do in another language. So and it's great, you know, experience on stage.
Yeah, I agree with that. The Gilbert and Sullivan pieces, they're so much fun, and they're so colorful, and they're so sarcastic and full of irony and fun and costumes. And I think it's a wonderful way to be active in the theater. My goodness, it's, and I'm going to second what Dolora said about doing something in their own language. So I'm all for Gilbert and Sullivan. Who was I? I can't remember her name, but I've sung in a couple of Gilbert and Sullivan productions in my early years. Sure.
You were one of the maidens.
Yes, one of the four.
Yeah, my first role was in Gilbert and Sullivan, the very first role I sang. It was Kate. I was 22.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was my very first role, and and the girl singing Edith was, it was also her first year of singing. And we were both new at it, and I was feeling uncomfortable with my high notes at that point, and she was feeling uncomfortable with her low notes. So we switched off. So I sang her low notes and she sang my high notes, and the director liked it so much and it worked so well with the text that he left it in. So she goes, you know, when Mabel and Fred are smooching in the bushes, The little sugar rise and lead in there together. And we sing together. The little sugar rise and talk about the weather. and then the year late, and then a year after, I had high notes and she had low notes, so we didn't have to do that anymore.
Wow, what a great story. Thank you, William.
Mm.
We got a comment from Guillermo. Thank you, ladies. A most interesting presentation. Luana, Aachen is very close to my heart. That's from Guillermo Schultz.
Oh. Why? Should I know this name?
Guillermo? Probably. He's a board member, so I'm sure you've met him a few times.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm very embarrassed because I have a very poor memory for names and people.
It's okay.
Oh, so do I.
Guillermo, what was the last name? Schultz?
Yeah, Guillermo Schultz.
Schultz.
You would know him if you saw him. He's a very distinguished gentleman.
Oh my gosh. Can you put his picture up?
I cannot. It's okay.
Okay.
It's okay.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm on Facebook. So send me your picture on Facebook.
Guillermo.
Just under my name, Luana DeVol.
All right, thank you. Next
Okay.
comment was from Adrian Hoffman. Thank you both for sharing your lives and voices with us. But Ms. DeVol, for me, all Lohengrens are measured against Jess Thomas.
Aha.
What was he like? As wonderful a person as he sounded?
He was a magnificent person. When I spent my years in the San Francisco Opera Course, I used to stand on the side of the stage and I watched him sing Tristan, and he was a lion when he came out on stage. And little did I know that I'd have the great privilege of studying with him. I studied with him for about 3 years, and I had forgotten my very first German opera that I studied with him was Fidelio. And he sang all the parts to me. It was jumping into a production where there was not going to be much rehearsal at all. So we sang all of the Fidelio parts, and he sang Marcellina in the duet. He sang Marcellina and Rocco in the trio, and then he sang his own role to me. So I was very, very well prepared. He was so generous in our sessions. As I mentioned, I had never gone to an official music school, but my music school was with Jess, because he would say, now you have to remember when you come on stage, where have you come from? Where are you going to? All of these things, so many things, you have to prepare yourself for singing. He taught me piano singing, and just a very gentle giant. He was amazing. His second wife, Violetta, she was also very kind to me. And Jim, you and I will have to trade stories at one point about that. But she left an apple in my car in Tiburon, where I was studying with him, and it said beautiful singing. And they were a beautiful pair. And his son also is taller than Jess, actually, has a beautiful tenor voice. It sounds just like Jess, but he just hasn't made it yet. So we'll see. Maybe we'll hear from him. But it's a great privilege to have sung with him. Wait a minute, I have something here. Here we go.
There you go.
That was me a long time ago, and Jess and Violetta. We were at an engagement of a Palo Alto Opera. What are they? West Bay Opera Company. Yeah. And that's where I was doing the Fidelio, and that's at the time he was teaching me Fidelio. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. It's a comment from Joanne Whitney. She goes, I'm only 83, but I've heard both of these wonderful singers in San Francisco. It's from Joanne. From Marilyn Gleistein, the discussion has been so fascinating. I have no questions except the last one. The two parts of the brain in the study that Dolora mentioned about the sensory part taking over during the performance. Question, how does it feel when you're performing? What are you feeling and concentrating while you are singing on stage? For example, as Amneris, during the crucial scene, what was going through your brain and motivating your actions? From Marilyn.
Well, it feels like you're on instinct. But what you really do, you've practiced it so much that you cut loose, and it's almost as if another person has taken over and is doing it. It's almost like you're observing somebody else doing it. And the interesting thing is when I perform like that, people say that that's when I'm the most involved emotionally, which I find interesting. You know, you just become something else when you're on stage. And of course, the subjective feeling is totally different from the objective feeling. There's a breathing exercise that is done by, you know, Buddhist monks, where they see if they can watch themselves breathe without interfering. And of course, in a way, that's what a singer has to do when they're learning support, because they're consciously trying to use all these muscles that don't work. And when they learn how to use their brain differently, it's a lot easier for them to support, to hook into that support. And it's in the case of singers, it's led by the ear. A really good book to read is The Inner Game of Tennis. I think there's a sequel to the book called The Inner Game of Sound or something like that. But it deals with the subjective experience from a professional point of view. What that feels like as a sports person when you're visualizing something before you do it. Too often singers just engage their mouth and then they correct it on the way. Whereas in the learning process, you have to have the right concept before you open your mouth. But when you're performing, that all goes out because it has become second nature. And then you're using your sensory motor cortex primarily is what you're doing. And it's a scary thing for a singer to do. It's a very frightening thing for a singer to do, because you think, well, what if I make a mistake? If I let go like that. But I started letting go, and I sang my first pianissimo that way.
Letting go.
Yeah. It was like this other person was doing it. Everybody said it really grabbed me when it was like you were so emotionally engaged. So there was an like there is an emotion going through it, but it's going through a different route.
Can I ask you something, Dolora?
Yeah.
When I watched, for example, the Brunhilde shot the segment that we viewed, my body still had muscle memory. My body was reacting. I mean, I was feeling exhausted at the end of the aria, as if I had actually sung it myself. Do you have the same reaction when you watch yourself?
That's kinesthetic empathy. That is the ability to sense in your body what another person is doing by what you're hearing. There was a famous Russian choreographer who went completely blind, and he was able to effectively choreograph because he would put his ear to the floorboards and he could tell by how it sounded. He would feel it in his body because he had done those moves himself so many times. So he recognized the sound as it hit the floorboards, and he was able to tell if something was out of sync, if their arms were out of sync with their feet or whatever. He could tell by just how it sounded. That's kinesthetic empathy. For a concert pianist, it'd be you go to a concert, you close your eyes, and you can tell just by the way it sounds, oh, that guy, he's got a slight little weakness in his pinky, so I think he might have strained his pinky a little bit.
I wonder if anybody in the audience feels the same way. I wonder if they feel this kinesthetic effect.
I think some people do. And it's something you're born with. It's not something I've discovered that you can't really you can't teach it to somebody. They either have it or they don't. You can cultivate it, but it's like a voice. You have to have a voice in the first place.
Right.
It's not something everybody's born with. And it's one of the gifts I think I've discovered you need if you're going to be a singer. Singers, they can have everything, but if they don't have that, they can't learn a vocal technique. And they can have everything. They can have musicality, musicianship, linguistic capability. They can have acting ability, they can have charisma, they can look good on stage, they can move well, but if they have that one missing thing, their career's going to last 5 years at the most, because they're not going to know what they're doing technically, because it's all natural.
Interesting.
They don't know how to make what they do better. And very few people actually even get to that point, because because if they need to learn something, they can't.
Okay, Will, you better jump in here or we're just going to gab away.
We're going to keep going.
It's very fascinating. Okay, from Teresa Stewart, greetings to Dolora and Luana from California. We adore you both here. I was fortunate to hear Luana's Susan B. Anthony and the Stuttgart Brunhilde, Dolora in countless roles. Warm regards to you from Teresa.
Thank you very much.
From Donnie Bryant, Dolora, were you scheduled to sing at the Met this year? So we missed your final performances, another pandemic tragedy.
Well, I mean, I'm not looking at it as a tragedy. It was going to be the last thing I was going to sing. It was going to be my farewell. I know that a lot of people were disappointed because many people were coming to sing it because that was to be the final, not only my swan song at the Met, but also my swan song to singing. And so by the time they could reschedule me, I would be in my 70s. And so, because I'm getting up there, and I think it's best to, you know, it's time to quit. I'm almost 70 now, and I think it's time. And I've been very fortunate. I have a very long career, and it's best to bow out now and let younger people take over.
Thank you.
And pass on what I know. I think that's where I belong right now.
Great. From Ari Fernandez, great program, Jim. It is a privilege to pose a question for Luana and Dolora. Please explain what a Schweizensinger is and what roles occur in Wagner's opera. From Ari.
Ari, what did you ask? Schweizensinger?
I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Zwischen.
Oh, so you mean Zwischenfach?
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thanks, Ari. Yeah, that's a person like Christa Ludwig, or who was the other one? Helga Danisch. You know, they had beautiful, warm mezzo ranges, but they also could touch on not the high notes that I could as a soprano, but they had good top notes as well. Fidelio is one role that's very often sung by a Zwischenfach person. They usually call it a Zwischenfach soprano, don't they, Dolora? I don't know.
Well, you know, that covers an interesting territory, because a Zwischenfach singer is somebody who kind of sits on the crack and can go and can sing on both sides if they're careful, but they kind of balance it half and half between the two roles. It's because of where their passaggio is. Whereas I think some people are confused with Zwischenfach singers because sometimes you have mezzos with really good upper extension, or a soprano with a good lower extension that could do an occasional role that's out of their Fach. That like there are some sopranos who could do a Carmen, for example. There are some mezzos who could do Lady Macbeth, but that doesn't make them Zwischenfach. A Zwischenfach is something different. That's somebody like that's somebody that actually their passaggio actually sits on the crack. So and my passaggio is definitely a mezzo passaggio, and Luana's is definitely a sopranos, whereas that Zwischenfach person would be something in between us. That's how I understand the designation.
Great, thank you. Marilyn had a follow-up comment. Yes, we feel it while you were singing, but in reduced form. So that's from
Yeah, that makes sense.
from Stephen Stitch. Luana, I remember
Hi.
first SFO Ariadne. It was the very first opera I attended. It's so nice to see and hear you again. From Stephen Stitch.
Well, is that Stephen from the family that I know well from the Paramount Theater?
It's Stich. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. Oh, well, that was very kind of him. Yeah, it was. That's great. Yeah, thank you.
Well, great. I mean, there's no more questions right now. Does anyone else have questions? You can go ahead and raise your hand or put it in the chat or Q&A. It's been really great with Dolora and Luana, especially for me as a singer. So I really enjoyed this. Let's see, we'll give it another minute or so. See if one wants to ask your question, or you two can talk about something more in depth if you want to. Go back to something.
What are you cooking for dinner tonight?
Who, me?
Dolora happens to be an excellent cook, by the way.
Oh, well, I've been cooking only for myself, so I've been eating rather simply lately.
Yeah.
I just pick stuff out of my garden, eat it, and then by the time I get in the house, I'm not hungry, so I haven't been cooking a lot.
Lots of fruits and vegetables. Well, that's
Lots
great.
of fruits and vegetables.
Can't eat any better than that, that's for sure.
Although I've been canning things. I got my new canner, so it's a new skill for me. So I've been canning stew and stuff like that. So it's kind of fun, making pickled eggs.
Yeah.
I have
Oh my God.
a question for you both. When you have singers coming in, what's probably one of the biggest things that you see now with singers that you're like, woof, why do we see this issue so much? Besides the text, is there something that you find that's just like it's a recurring pattern for new singers?
Yeah, I've noticed some.
Yeah, me too.
And they come from the oddest things. One is the breathing complications that come from singers that all through junior high and high school or middle school wore a backpack. And so they have this posture that they're like this all the time. And correcting that posture when they're singing is sometimes a major issue. Sometimes it takes a year to fix that, or Alexander technique or something, because I'm seeing a lot of those posture issues. When we were young, we didn't have backpacks. You carried your books, or you threw them in your locker. And now everybody has a backpack, and that really that changes your body and changes your posture. And so I'm discovering that I have to make adjustments for that, to fix those things in teaching singers how to sing. Singers who have had dance and somehow that counteracts all that because they don't want to ruin their bodies. So I find that kids that have had dancing experience don't have that problem. Another thing that I've noticed is that singers are less supervised than they used to be. And so now teachers say, you got to practice, but they don't tell them what they're supposed to practice, and they have nobody to practice with. You have to work with coaches. I mean, most schools, if you're lucky and you get into some conservatories, you're going to get, a lot of coaches to work with, but most music schools, you have maybe one coach. And getting that daily, that weekly, twice a week coaching is just as much a part of singing as voice lessons. And singers, too often they just get 45 minutes and then they're cut loose, and then they're not told how to learn. They're not told how to listen to singers. They listen for the wrong things. Like they'll go on a recording and they'll just learn a whole bunch of mannerisms and think that's style. And then and somebody needs to have them listen to those singers. So it's all about supervision, and a lot of schools don't really require that. They just put them in classes. You take a French diction class, you take a German diction class, and we're missing that one-on-one intensive work that people used to do at a much earlier age.
And
what are your thoughts on that?
I'd like to jump on that with the music in the schools. We have a wonderful coloratura soprano here in the Las Vegas area. She is a music teacher in the school, teaches singing and choir, and she has 300 students. Not at one time, but during the day, during the week, she has 300 students. How do you give the individual instruction? The lack of music and art and the performing band, all of those things, the lack of these programs in the schools is really crushing the arts. I think we really need to get back to somehow give them, not everybody can afford private lessons, but I think that's really having an effect, a long range effect on what's going on.
Great, thank you for answering that. Marilyn had another question. Back to Dolora, don't good teachers help to analyze how to become better as singers? And she's talking about analyzing one's strengths.
Well, okay. Yeah, of course you have to be objective about yourself, but there's three levels of teaching, and they are all effective but some are better than others. But if you can even get to the lowest level and you have talent, you will eventually learn how to sing. So let's look at the lowest level of teaching that's effective. Okay, this is a teacher that has a really good ear. The singer's got a good ear. This teacher recognizes when the sound is right. The singer recognizes when the sound is right. And the teacher says, yes, that's it. And then the singer figures out how to fix it. Okay. That's the lowest level. And that's what a lot of coaches do, actually, from a vocal point of view, not from text and things like that, or music, but just from a vocal point of view. Then you have your second level of teacher. Okay, the teacher recognizes the right sound, the student recognizes the right sound, and they work together in a partnership to figure out just exactly what it is that made that work. They analyze it, they figure it out. Okay. Then you have the highest level of teacher, and this is a teacher. The teacher recognizes the sound, the singer recognizes the sound, and the teacher knows how to get them there quickly. They know what exercises are going to make this happen, and they know why those exercises work. They figured it out. They know what works for them. They know that what works for them doesn't necessarily work for somebody else. They don't have a cookie cutter approach to vocal technique. They approach each singer as an individual singer, and because singers are different, and they're able to get them there by design, very quick, more quickly than the teacher that recognizes the sound and the student recognizes the sound. But you would be amazed how many singers have good careers with the lowest level of teacher, because they were able to figure out what made it work. Okay, so it really depends on the singer, and the singer will know if they're with a good teacher. And if they're, I remember when my voice teacher said, it's time to leave. You need to go to New York. There's no place for you. I'm not going to use you in my opera company. You have to go to New York. Now, he only sent the people that had the most talent or the people he wanted to get rid of to New York. And so I wasn't quite sure which one it was. And I said, well, I would like to have do you know a good voice teacher in New York? And he said, no. And I said, well, I mean, how do I find a good voice teacher? He says, you'll know. You just take some lessons and then you'll know. And you know what? He was right. He was absolutely right. Another incident, I was singing my debut with San Francisco Opera, High Priestess in Aida. Leontine Price was the Aida. And I was telling her about a friend of mine. I said, he's got everything. He's got a voice, he's got looks, he's got every talent that you need to be a singer, but he's with the wrong voice teacher. And he thinks that this teacher's helping him. And I said, don't you think that I, as his friend, should tell him that he should maybe switch teachers? And she said, absolutely not. And I said, why? And she said, because if he can't tell, he doesn't have what it takes. And she was right, because that's part of the ability. So the singer has to have the ability to learn, and the teacher has the ability to impart. And of course, the singer will recognize when there was somebody that's helping them, whether they're doing it on their own or whether that teacher is getting them there quickly. They'll know. And that has been my experience. I know that's a long-winded answer to the question, that ability to self-analyze. It takes more than an analytical ability. It takes an objectivity that is very difficult for many singers to maintain. A singer has to be very objective about what they can and cannot do, how they fit in the scheme of things. But at the same time, they have to have that confidence to get up and do what they do on stage, and have confidence of what they do well, and to recognize what they do well, and to really know what those things are, rather than just trying to, convince themselves they're great so that they have courage when they get on stage, or if they just have this need to feel like they're the world's greatest singer. So if you have that objectivity, that really helps in learning a vocal technique as well. If you run up against a singer that they're so insecure that they can't look at themselves objectively, you're going to have troubles. Now, of course, it's different when they're young, when they're 18, 19, 20. That's a scary time for an adolescent singer, because as high school students, they were usually the center of their, the star of their high school. And now all of a sudden, they have lost their confidence, because before, if they had known what they didn't know when they were singing in high school, they would have never had the courage to sing. So you don't want to take away their confidence at that age. But by the time they get at the conservatory level, then they have to start dealing with that. So, and that's a tricky transition for singers. They either lose their confidence, or they become cocky and they think they know everything, and they become sophomoristic, and they make poor decisions.
That was great. Thank you. From George Cacchetti, Dolora or Luana, how do you help young singers with big voices to avoid pushing?
Well, let Luana go first, and then I'll come in after.
It takes, excuse me, there's my stupid phone. Turn that off. Yeah, young singers with big voices are really, it's really a delicate thing with them, because they're usually taught when they're really young that they have to be quiet, they have to shut up, or they don't fit in the choir unless they do something different with their voice, and mask the fact that they have these ginormous voices that should be developed. The thing is, a big voice, you have to teach them that you have to sing like a lyric soprano. It's basically, I did an interview one time in Berlin, and this guy insisted, he kept asking me, how do you make a voice big? How do you make a voice big? And every time he'd ask that, I would answer the same way: you don't make it big, it is big. You can increase the volume by singing more efficiently. He would not accept that answer. And so it's really hard to get through to young people that you have to really sing on the breath, you have to sing on the body, just like every other singer. And the wonderful effect is it frees up their voice to be what it actually is. And so when you teach them the balance to get your air support along with your phonation, and Dolora is really a wonderful expert at getting these kids, because she gets them in the discovery and in the intermediate program, which are the younger kids. And so it's there where they discover all of this, that it's okay to have a big voice, you just don't have to hide it.
Yeah, I remember we auditioned a bass. He was 16, and he would lean his head to the side, and he would sing through his nose, and he had this really pitiful sound. And then all of a sudden he sang this extraordinary low note, and I said, wait a minute. And then he went back to this weird singing, and then he sang a high note. Now, it wasn't completely covered, but it was pretty respectable and pretty remarkable for a 16-year-old. Well, it turned out that where he was singing poorly was where he was trying to fit into his a cappella choir in high school. So we told him, well, you need to quit the choir. And he starts crying, and he says, oh no, it's the most important thing in my life. So what we did was we got him with an adult choir that joined up with a college chorus every year to do the Messiah. And the director the conductor was so impressed with his voice that he, because his voice came back right away, that he gave him a solo. So, but that is a typical thing that happens with a big voice. People don't know what to do with it. Now, when you get to the thing about pushing, is a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to sing Verdi, and then they push like crazy, thinking that's how you get a big sound. And as Luana says, you don't make a big sound. You're born that way. And it's about accepting what your voice is, and you can make it have more presence, but you can't make it bigger than what it really is. And voices actually find their size fairly earlier than people think. If you're a lyric soprano, or you're a lyrico spinto at 22, it's highly unlikely you're going to be a dramatic at 30. You might turn into a spinto, but you're probably not going to be a dramatic. Okay, so with men, it's a little different, because it depends on how they grow. Usually if the secondary sex characteristics come in really early, the voice kind of solidifies at that size. And whereas in ones that have basically stopped growing, and ones that have not had their major growth spurt yet, that window of time, and that can go clear up into the early 20s for some men. So, you know, you're not going to know what a young man is until they're in mid-20s sometimes. Whereas a girl, you pretty much know by her early 20s what she is. You know, I get this all the time that, well, I have a singer that she might be a dramatic voice. And the only reason they were making her dramatic voice is because she was overweight, and they figured that that was the only way she could get hired. And that happens a lot. You know, somebody's big because they want pretty people for, you know, the lyric parts. And so if somebody's kind of beefy, they go, well, you know, you're really a mezzo, or you're really a, your voice it's still growing. That's the excuse they always give. It's still growing. And I think that's a real disservice to singers who are lyrics, and they need to be told their lyrics. And if you're a soubrette, don't be ashamed. Be a real soubrette. You'll have a much better chance at a career. But pushing, how do you get rid of pushing? It's complicated because you have to learn how to support and focus. If you learn to focus and support, and not that's the key to getting out of pushing. But that's a very lengthy process. And let me explain why. Okay, if you can blame the FOXP2 gene. If we didn't have the FOXP2 gene, we wouldn't be able to speak. Okay, so we have voluntary breathing and we have involuntary breathing. Now, if you don't think about it and you're just not paying attention, you automatically breathe. You don't even have to think about it. Okay, so what happens, you know, the back of your brain takes over and it's automatic. So what happens is the diaphragm contracts, air goes in, relaxes, it goes out. It contracts, it comes in, it relaxes, it goes out. But if you're going to speak, that's a different thing. So you have to control the airflow. So what you do is you become consciously aware of your breath. You don't change your breath when you sing, when you speak. You just become aware of it, and then you speak. Well, if you couldn't control your breath, you wouldn't be able to speak. Okay, and the FOXP2 gene is they actually turned on this gene in mice, and all of a sudden there was an increased innervation to their snout and their whole mouth area, their face, their vocal folds, and their breathing mechanism. So it's all related. So teaching somebody to use a different set of muscles to control that exhalation of air and to be able to increase the amount of air that you take in, that is a very difficult thing for a person to learn, because there's a crossover between involuntary and voluntary functions. Involuntary with your brain and muscles and nerves, and the same with the voluntary. And so when you're crossing over the involuntary with the voluntary, that takes years to sort out. That's real brain training. And that is why that's why you can have a folk singer or a jazz singer who just uses the voice they have. They don't make it any better than it is. It's just what it is. And they sing, and they just use it as their medium. Whereas singers, when they're learning how to control that breath to really get it to that next level, they're in no man's land. And that no man's land can last for 10 years for some people. So that's why it's so difficult to teach somebody how to sing. And that's one reason why singers push, because they haven't learned how to do that kind of breathing. It takes a long time to learn that kind of breath control.
Wow, that was great. That was wonderful. Let's see. Looks like we don't have any more questions. I mean, that was a wonderful question to go out on, and I can also speak for Jim and the rest of us that this was an absolutely wonderful and beautiful webinar. So thank you for joining us from sunny Reno.
And Las Vegas.
And Las Vegas.
Yes. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Thanks to everybody. I hear we had, 150 tickets sold? I think that's amazing. That's wonderful. And so thanks to everybody for sticking with us and listening. And it's been fascinating for us too.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Dolora and Luana. Have a great night.
Okay.
Thank you.